First of all, let me greet you all and thank for this opportunity to see you here, to hear each other, and to have a person from the land so far and from the context so far. But it means much to have a dialogue, to have an opportunity of exchange our views. So thanks once more. And I will start with a quotation from the poem of one of my friends, Andrei Hayetsky, a poet from Odessa, which is constantly under the Russian bombing. And he wrote a brilliant short poem in which the journalist asks him how the war influenced his writing and his life. And he answers in the most concrete way. And he repeats it. So this is my answer too, because when you wake up one morning under the Russian bombing, you feel that you have no language more. There is no language to describe this new reality and absolutely new experience, because the war in Ukraine erupted not even in February 2022. It has been going on from 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea and other Ukrainian territories in the east. And I will go further and say that this war, this ideological conflict, in fact exists as long as Ukrainian and Russian statehood exists. And it's the matter of colonialism, and Russia provides a colonial war. And then, after a few weeks of this great invasion, after this great war, I've just got a feeling that it's a matter of language. This great flow of language which takes you and makes you speak, because the writing in the war is the act of naming things, first of all. And it was very important to tell myself, to tell my people, to tell the world that it's a war. It's not just a conflict, it's not just some local misunderstanding. Oh, yeah. And when you feel this need and this power of naming, you just get the new kind of powerful speaking, and you feel very powerful and very important when you speak to the audience. So the war is sadly, but the main and the most important thing we Ukrainian writers are speaking about.
Everything. It's everything. Now, about you, Othniel, how do you... So you are from a region that was burning for 15 straight years. War was exported. Fonde Sanko was in Sierra Leone. There was problems in Conakry. Sierra Leone, Liberia, that entire angle was on fire. There were fighters who had left Libya coming back down after being trained in Gaddafi's camps. For 2 decades, it became synonymous. So, and you're a folklorist. You look back in time for stories to explain the present. How did you personally engage the conflict in your writing? What effect does it have on what you are occupied with? What effect does it have on how you hold present realities to task, how you take them to task, how you don't excuse stuff?
It is quite heavy. When you have a lease on life, everything changes. So when the war hit in 1989, we were preparing for the academic year. in that process, everything shut down, and everyone had this notion that this is just going to be 2 weeks. But then your word turns upside down in no time. It's a hard to describe because one moment you are at home and the next moment you are on the street, you're filing with 20, 30,000 people just on the road walking. It doesn't matter what you have or you don't have. You just flee. Bullets are flying, and you have to encounter bodies on the way at different stages of decay. It's not an easy thing to deal with the war. So what happens is that you shut down. You block those things because you either make it or you don't make it. It's a traumatic experience that is hard to leave you. So even after the war, 30, 40 years, you still find it somewhere in you where that is there. You're always looking over your shoulders. When certain things happen, it's like in my country, we have a saying in the folklore that when a snake bites you before, even if you saw a thread or a worm, I mean, you take it to be a snake. It's just a thread on the floor. You're going to panic and think it's a snake. So when we see these spaces being abused, it brings back those traumatic things. And that's why you keep writing and infusing in your writing all of those things. You are struggling for justice and freedom and all of those things on the one hand, but you are you've been tempered how you say those things. How hard do you fight? How far do you push? Am I going to be testing the authorities to the point that they get over and they flip? And there's so many factors. It never leaves you. It's always there.
So, Katrina, and both of you, I'm going to lead off from that. Is how do you, on the one hand, deal with the political and personal aspects of writing in this time, during conflict? And how do you, now this is from a craft point of view as a fellow writer, how do you find the language? What do adjectives mean? How do you describe blood as redder than red? Where does it come from? And for a poet, how do you find it? Yeah.
It's a very important and interesting question. Thank you, because we all Ukrainian writers, and I will repeat it often, because it's very important for us to feel us as a society of creators, let's say. So it's very important to feel that we are together, and we all are trying to find a new language, because there is a strong feeling that our previous, so-called previous language, the old language we used to have as our instrument of explaining ourselves, is
inadequate?
Yes, it's not rough enough to deal with this reality, and we have to invite not even new words, but to recover the profoundness of the old words we used to write with, and we are in search. It's a flow, as I said before, answering the previous question, and it's a great job of collective memory, because we are somehow speaking about the transgeneration traumas during all this non-stoppable Ukrainian-Russian wars. And we are trying to find some true meanings of words, because a week ago we discussed at the Lviv Book Forum with a colleague, a poet, Katerina Michalitsina, how to describe the good written book of war. You can't just say that it's a good book, because it's about an awful experience. It's about all about the trauma, about the suffering, grief, and so on, and pain. It's not a good book, but it's well written. How could you call it? How could you describe that it's a good literature, but on something very traumatic? And somehow there is no difference between personal and political now in Ukraine,
Yeah.
because when you identify yourself as a Ukrainian, you are involved in this political discourse, and you should remember that your very personal history, your own life story, the history of your family and so on, is a part of this big, painful and very, mm, very glorious in some way Ukrainian history, because it's a great story of resilience, resistance.
From the Holodomor, was that what it was called? Holodomor in the 1930s?
Yeah,
The starvations?
yeah. For example, 2 world wars,
Yeah.
a great restoration, and genocide repeated several times, ethnical killings, and so on and so on. And despite it all, Ukrainians survived. Ukrainian built their statehood, brought it back to them, because we have our own
You had
statehood
your
at
old
the beginning of the
princes. Yeah, there was a
so
prince
this
in
is a
Kiev.
continuous story, and we are not a country which suddenly appeared on the world map. We just regained our statehood after the 17 years of occupation by Russia, by Soviet.
Because I read about that, and I also, so just to find out just some background, so Kievan Rus, you are descendants of the Kievan Rus?
Yes, and then our great history was, let me be rough in the formulation, it was stolen. It was taken by Russia because when there was...
The Mongols destroyed Kievan Rus.
Well, Ukrainian Kievan university professors in the late Middle Ages came to Moscow to teach future Russian professors of sciences. And then they said that they teach us. So that's the story, long story short. And it's a very long statehood tradition. It's a very deep culture, and that's why they took our name and they tried to eliminate us because we are the antithesis of this so-called untouchable great Russian culture and great Russian empire. And Vladimir Putin, is in his article of summer 2021, indicated very clearly that this great Russian project is impossible without Ukraine. When Ukraine is standing alone state, it just makes this
it
great...
undermines the narrative.
Yes, it breaks the narrative of this great Russian empire, and it stands on the Ukrainian basis. And when we came along, we just ruined all the thing.
Yeah. Speaking to that, how do you engage the political and the personal, Otnel, especially apart from, there was a small break with half of the region on fire was French speaking, the rest was Anglophone. America was also there, but behind those lines in the sand, it was the same people.
True.
Bleeding themselves. So how do you find the language? How do you, like I said, how do you find the words heavy enough, guttural enough to speak to the kind of pain you have when you're walking by, you see bodies in different states of decomposition?
And that's the thing, it's so hard to say, because during the war, mostly those who write about the war are non-natives, sitting on the outside and telling these narratives. So the narrative is driven from the outside. You just basically sort of struggling to survive. So you want to get from one point to the next. You're not thinking about writing, you aren't thinking about being creative. So that narrative is coming from out there, or there are natives who are sitting out there in the comfort, and they're writing what they hear and seeing. That's the one angle. Most of this writing comes out after the war, when there are breaks and pauses during the war. We happen to have several breaks during our war, and then people began to write. So when we took Ford Publishing back home, we didn't know what exactly we were looking for. One thing we did decide that we weren't going to write war stories. None of those. We didn't want to tell war stories where you come and you blame one faction, you paint in. We were trying to stay away from the fault lines. You talk about the political issue. We made a clear decision. We're going back home. We're going to work on things that will heal and bring where we are find the commonness between our diversity. We aren't going to play on the fault lines. So we received a lot of manuscripts, and it was a hard decision at a point in time. I didn't think it was going to be that difficult. So I come from the Crown ethnic group. I come from the Gyo ethnic group. We've been fighting each other for 14 years. My story is I was in a home and these people came and killed my family. I survived. That's my story. That's my reality. And I want to tell that story. But that story, I can't tell that story without blaming people from other ethnic groups.
Yeah, I was wondering, exactly.
And then those from the Gyo ethnic group tell the same story of brutalization, other things, and they're blaming the other. And that's what we chose deliberately to avoid. There were great manuscripts we received, but then they played into those lines. Not until we came across Pana Gege's book, Liberian Civil War Through the Eyes of a Child, and then like Ballet's Scary Dreams. Now, what struck me about those two manuscripts was I knew what I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. What Pana did was amazing because she was a little girl.
What's her
going through
name?
the war. Pana Gege.
Panal Gege, okay.
Yeah, so her book is called Liberian Civil War Through the Eyes of a Child. And then she starts to catalog everything she saw during the war.
In real time, at that time?
As they were happening, she had a little book, and she had nothing to do. She was a kid, so she was writing things down, just jotted down into an actual copybook. So she brings this copybook to me and tells me I want to write. She had not even transcribed it in a digital format. And I'm reading, and I'm fascinated because one moment she's at this place and the family is struggling. They've crossed the wrong enemy lines and they have to change their tribes and do that. And then the next moment, she doesn't know.
They have to change their identities,
it's
pretend to be
altogether,
somebody else.
I'm this place, I'm that place. But then one place in the story, she tells of her sister, where she sees her sister every morning. And for me, that was the hardest part. And I made a decision basically to take the book on because of that. She sees her sister wakes up every morning and she goes to her house. She stays there by an hour or two. She comes back in tears, and she goes straight to take bath. But then this sister is bleeding almost every day. She doesn't understand what is happening, and she comes to her sister all the time, trying to console her. But she doesn't know that the sister she's what you call rebel's wife. So the commanders have taken her, and she's one of those young girls who when the boys come from the front line, they need to release, and she's one of the housewives. She's fortunate she can come back to her family, and at the expense of not going after the two little sisters, the bigger one has to go in place of
The two younger sisters?
And she doesn't understand why her sister kind of hates her, because she's next to her. She should be the next one going. But somewhere in between there, the family decided that we will sacrifice you for the rest.
And there appears many diary entries.
Thank you. So one moment she's struggling with this love-hate relationship with the sister, and she struggles with that until the sister eventually dies. And she matures, realizes, this is what my sister did for me. Now she feels guilty. How could I have been, this way to her when I wasn't understanding what was happening? So that kind of frame of voice for us, we decided to tell stories that happened during the war instead of telling war stories. And that shaped what we did. So all the manuscripts were taken, where they're telling a story within the war, where we left the politics out, where we left those fault lines out. We talked about them historically, give backdrop, but nothing more. The story has to be about the individual in there. And Lekwele did the same thing. How do you deal with an 8-year-old child who sees trauma that he's never had to deal with, who has to stay in one room, and in that room, every night people are having sex, and he's not even aware. I mean, you're basically there. And the next morning, you go out there to look for food, and people are being gutted and those things. And how does that child process all of that trauma? And so those are the stories we chose to tell. And in telling those stories, it's hard to say you find a voice. You tell the story in a way that you're conscious of the fact that you want to release the trauma, but you also want justice. You want to tell this story in a way that this child sees the story. So those two books set the pace for us because Scary Dreams was about poems. And so this child goes into the form of just writing poetry. Everything he saw, he diverted, he locked them out, and then he found his voice to writing poetry. Where Pana, on the other side, she starts to write, about it in prose. Those two books stood apart because they were the first two we lifted off that started the chain of our telling stories that happened during the war. And every time we read those stories, we have book readings. It is like clockwork. It happens every time. People cry. People tell you, this is my story. This happened to me. That happened to me. Because they can now see themselves, see the actions in there. It's hard to say what is going to happen at any reading. You know this is going to happen. People break down and tell you stories that are even more, shocking than you thought. You have people tell you, and there are some stories we still haven't written. There was an old man who tells his story of how he had to play football with coconut. So his son was one side with his wife, and he and his daughter were on the other side. And he played the coconut with his bare feet. You know, the coconut is heavy. Yeah. And until someone scores, they weren't going to be left. And these people are being entertained.
Oh, the rebels forced the family
to play football
with coconuts or get shot.
Yeah, and one side has to score before the game ends. Yeah, and this guy is there, his wife and his son, and he and his daughter on the other side. He didn't know what's going to happen afterwards. So they play eventually, he scores. He's a guy, he plays, and then after that, they say, okay, now the losing side gets killed. Fine. Now, I can't finish that story. I still can't finish that story.
Then don't.
Because
it's enough.
When he sits down to tell, I find this story out in a very funny way, a sad way, because during the peace, there was a break. ECOMOG had come in and they had settled a peace.
ECOMOG is the Economic Community of West African States Military Intervention Force. So we became peace enforcers, not peacekeepers.
Yeah. They enforce a level of peace, and people are trying to find
by shooting everybody that moved. It worked.
It works sometimes. So we come home, we're in the market, we're going to buy, my dad and I are walking around the market, and this guy is selling rice. He's there selling rice. And I see this old man from the corner of my eye. Everyone is fighting to buy rice from this guy. And this old man stands for a long time, and he looks at this guy over the wheelbarrow selling rice. And then he starts to walk between the market tables. No one knows what he's doing. So I pick it up and pinch my dad and say, what is he doing? He says, let's watch it. So we step aside from the crowd. This old man finds his way through the market table, finds a sizable 2x4 stick. He walks over, makes his way into that crowd, and he knocks the guy in the back of his head. And everyone is shocked. Why are you doing this? This guy falls down flat on the floor into the wheelbarrow, drops over with the rice. And the old man is standing there, and he's like, so the guy was saying, like, I wished it in our Kolokwa. I made it cheap. It's very cheap. You can buy the rice.
You should take the rice and go.
Yes. So I wasted. And that's the title I have for the story. I wasted. So why he's saying I wasted, then the old man says, no, you didn't waste it. I wasted. So everyone is shocked and looking.
So the rice seller was one of those boys?
Yeah. It turns out the ECOMOG comes in, they take the old man and they revive the boy and take them to the station. We follow through. And then the old man tells this story.
That the boy was a child soldier.
He was one of the soldiers that engineered this thing. So for me to lose my family, so he goes out with his daughter, his wife and his son, they're killed. The old man goes back with his daughter. He can't take care of her. He's all bruised and bleeding. He shows mark on his leg where his toes have all been something. And the girl eventually dies because he can't take care of her. He's struggling. He loses his entire family for someone who's now living and selling as if nothing is wrong.
Nothing happened.
And now what do I do? That's the question he asked them. So why do I allow this man to live? I'd rather kill him, and you can do anything you want to do to me. And I don't care what you do to me.
But that also speaks to common themes in war. So there's this myth of mechanized war, of European war being about machines. Yeah. But for us, we saw different images because the African thing is to love the underdog. But we saw African students, the way they were treated in trying to leave the country, by those who were victims. So victimhood is not automatic sainthood. But we also saw backmoves. We saw that behind the mechanized wars, behind the drones, there were people ready to gut and kill people face to face, to burn people inside rooms. So, and I was speaking to the idea of common themes that even if during the war you can't engage because you are so close to it. I was hoping to say, what do you anticipate happening when it inevitably ends, when the shooting ends? What do you think happens? How do you think you make peace with neighbors? Because your communities have been like this. Yeah.
You know, this is a story of how a tragedy, genocide and mass killing becomes a possibility for Ukraine. Because finally we are speaking from our own name, not just like crazy indigenous tribes trying to get their rights back, but from the country, from the great community which is organically, historically a part of this big European family and the common European project. And many people, due to this huge wave of interest to Ukraine after the great invasion erupts, just started to indicate Ukraine on the world map. They tried to understand what's the country it is. And many Ukrainian writers, public intellectuals, artists in different fields got the possibility to go to the world and to speak to others. And you know, I've got a situation during the flight to Ghana. A very pleasant man sitting next to me in the row saw my Ukrainian ID, passport, and started a chat with me. And then he asked, so you speak English, you speak Ukrainian, and do you speak Twi language? Unfortunately, I don't.
Yeah.
I would like to. But it was very touching because he didn't ask about the Russian language. You are far enough from Ukraine and Russia, from the borders, to not to put our in this colonial perspective, to this colonial understanding of coexistence of these two countries, and you just take us like an independent country with our own language, because our closer neighbors are used to eat, to drink this Russian propaganda, and to treat us like a part of this empirical project. Yes, and they just think we all speak Russian, lesser or totally, and we should explain very obvious things about us, the things we just don't take as something new for us inside Ukraine, but we are just trying to explain from the very beginning, from the Kievan Rus, from the Ukrainian statehood at the beginning of 20th century,
Yes.
after the
Revolution.
end of after the end of Russian Empire and First World War, and so on and so on, and people are. They are trying to find simply answers for complicated questions, and when two close neighbors with, as it seems to them, same history, are going into a war between each other, then finally they understand that there is two different countries with two different visions of future, and for example. All Ukrainian polls say that the society wants to get back to the EU family, and all the Russian polls say that they are supporting so-called special war operation, and they are totally supporting Vladimir Putin policy to bring back the Russian Empire.
So So speaking to you and also to her, because where you guys are is basically what the future will be. What is the role of the writer in promoting reconciliation after the shooting stops? And how possible, when it gets to you, after I finish, how possible do you think it is to even promote reconciliation? Now, between the peoples, not the leaders will leave, but between the peoples, the pain, the sense of betrayal, that wasn't faked. So it wasn't as though somebody was bribed to talk nonsense, but people that you considered siblings believing certain stuff. How do you see that happening? So first, you've been there, your society has been there. How does it happen? How does writing promote truth?
Now, you will find common themes. It's not all gloom and dark. So what happens when the war stops? People are still trying to find themselves, make sense of those difficult questions. She said, why me? Why my family? Why this? Those are simple questions. They may seem, but for a family, it could mean everything. You won't get all the answers to the whys, but people have to start internalizing the war. That's what you see. That's the first stage you see it happens at that level. So everyone is internalizing, why did it happen to us like this? Why did I lose this person? Why, what if I had made these choices? And you begin from blaming and seeking answers. You're so involved in that period, you're not looking outward to what else is happening. It's just why these things happened. Now, some people stay there forever. Others graduate from there and they're like, okay, I still have to leave. I now found myself here. What do I do? What skills do I have? How do I move my life forward? Do I go back home? Do I stay in exile? So that becomes another level. So all those things start to emerge. People just want to live, and they want to live comfortably. People block those traumas that they had. Some take that trauma out. And for our case, there was a large Liberian population at the refugee camp here. There was some in Nigeria, some in Ivory Coast. And in between all of that struggle, those phases, you find the occasional cases where people meet the perpetrators and they go at it. And occasionally people meet the perpetrators and they're like, I forgive you. It's never fixed. It's a personal thing. And those are all moving things, because you see a woman look at you and tell you, this person killed my family, but I'm not going to do anything. And people are angry. Why are you going to let him go? She said, well, we survived the war. We are all here. I just want to get over that phase. I need to heal and move on. She's not angry. The crowd is angry. Someone else who wants revenge.
Society wants justice.
Justice. And in our case, where we have not had a TRC, the TRC
you guys have, truth and reconciliation. You guys haven't done it?
Almost all our perpetrators walking around. The level of impunity is high. So you find out that even in the market, something happens, and this stereotype called the Zogos, the young people who are child soldiers or who've come over, when anything happens, the mob justice is going on, because I didn't get justice during the war.
Oh, so they killed them, they lynched them?
Lynched them.
That's the child soldiers who are now adults?
Now,
Somebody
most of
recognizes them?
Yeah. The larger group of the Zogos now are not child soldiers, but that's the academic thing. People don't do that. They began as child soldiers who grew up and they are now in their 30s and 40s. They lived through the war. And they began that Zogo group.
How did they integrate back into society? How difficult has it been? They have jobs, or they become thugs, political thugs?
They are thugs. They began thugs because no one wanted to take them back. We didn't have a proper forum to discuss these issues. It's either I dealt with the situation as a family or the individual, or I let it go. And up to today, you still find people meeting perpetrators and going off. You would think this thing happened 12 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago,
yeah.
But this person blows off. I've had 20 years to think what I'm going to do to you when I see you. And you'll be shocked. Someone was maybe this high or this high, but that face never goes away. And they all tell you the same
when
thing.
he's 30?
So even when he grows with all that, be a person like this is, the person. And almost always it happens to be true. Yeah. So when you go through those phases, you will go through those phases, and then it has a way with time to heal. It has a way with, for those in exile, you don't get to meet the perpetrators immediately. But it doesn't help when the system...
When the system doesn't recognize it.
Because you have warlords in parliament, warlords being appointed, moving with a level of impunity is there. It makes people, the anger is still there. But then, on the other hand, something surprisingly happens. That's a fun part to read. And we found out that there are stories, a whole bunch of stories we started writing about people who make fun of the things that happened during the war. So there was this guy, he's a PhD holder in the social sciences. He's going through the war and someone recognizes him and says, "Oh, hi, doc." And the rebels are like, "Oh, he's a doctor?" They gave him privileged treatment. Take his family, transport them, they're moving. Everyone wants a doctor, right?
Yes.
You're a doctor.
Was he a doctor?
He was a doctor. That's how he was identified. It happens that they go 2 or 3 towns after and they meet this guy. He's wounded. And the rebel is like, well, we got
Oh,
a doctor
doctor, we
here.
got a doctor.
And then he's like, but you know, I'm not a medical doctor. And the guy
I'm
is
a
like,
doctor of
"Dude,
agriculture.
we give you all these privileges, you gotta heal this guy." And he's standing over this guy. He has to do something with this person who's bleeding, but he's a doctor. As far as I'm concerned, it was that simplistic in some areas. It's funny because he's now faced with a situation where I either be a doctor or I die. And then he has to do something. He ties this guy up, does some crazy
First
thing,
aid.
but he lives.
The guy
And now
survives.
He's assigned to this battalion. He's the medical doctor.
So he's a rebel doctor for the
He's a
rest of the
rebel
war.
doctor for the rest of the war. He gets privileges, but he has to make his way through. And he tells this story. It's funny because he now has to be finding ways to, dodge these people from serious injuries because they have his family. He first smuggles his family out, and then eventually makes his way out. So those things happen. It's not all gloom and sad. You begin to look. So as a publisher, we look at these stories. We tell the deep stories. We tell the sad stories. But then we also find a way to tell the lighter stories. Like I have a story called Liberia 4, Ghana 5. Here. So we were here. We don't know why the Ghanaians say Liberia 4, Liberia 4. We always thought it was Liberia 4, the number 4. We didn't know it was like many people. So anything a Liberian does about Liberia 4, Liberia 4, and we're like, what the heck?
Liberia what?
4. That's how we understood 4.
But what were they
It's
saying?
People, Liberian people.
Oh, Liberian people means...
So you go to interact. We have different cultures.
Yeah.
Some people like to window shopping. We have a system where people really like to window shopping. They are not kind to that. They believe if you want to buy, you buy. You don't want to buy, you go. So someone comes to your place and check this thing out and everything.
And he's haggling.
And he goes. Or he haggles you for the price. They think you should pay and go along. And there are those who will come and just pay. So in that case, when you leave it and you go and they're angry, like, you just wasted my time, you didn't buy anything, and then they say Liberia 4. So we never understood what the 4 was, and we were like, why are you just say Ghana 5? And it's simple. And every time you say Liberia 4, it'll be like Ghana 5.
Oh, is it that Liberians have a reputation for haggling?
Not just haggling, just little things where the cultural clashes come in. And because they can understand the cultural clash, they just say, you Liberian people,
Okay,
you are this way. And
yeah,
we are like,
let
you
me get back to
Ghanaians are
Catherine.
Ghana 5.
Let me get back to Catherine. So that's a glimpse of the future. So
Like, yeah, with the tree.
common themes that you identified and what your hopes are for what writing can do for your people, for reconciliation, for healing the pain, or for justice at least amongst the people. The leaders it will come to them. What do you think happens?
I'm also deeply involved in the Balkan context, so I know a lot about the War of 19s and especially of Bosnian war and genocide committed by Serbia. And I have a friend of mine, a Bosnian brilliant author, Ozran Kebo, and we had a discussion at the Lviv Book Forum a week ago. And he said a very important thing that I'm bringing here today. I asked him if there is any justice for victims and for the people who committed crimes after the 30 years plus after the war. And he said, unfortunately, no. The Hague Tribunal was good, but not enough. And but he said, but I believe in justice in art, in books, in good films, in art projects, telling truth, bringing it to the world. So this is probably a good answer.
In cultural memory.
Yeah.
In
yeah,
how they are remembered.
yeah.
That's justice. Yes.
Exactly. And, all Ukrainians do now in the field of arts are full of pain, grief, mourning the killed people. And as for future and as for your previous thesis about the coexistence after the war ends, we are living through the time of very painful truths and insights, and I strongly believe that no one, or almost no one in Ukraine, now consider Russians as their siblings
anymore, yes.
Yes, because there are people who even interrupt their family contacts and so on. It's no possibility of a dialogue with the nation which is committing genocide, ecocide, and killing. And after every bombing of Ukrainian cities and villages, after every missile, rocket killing civilians, women, children, you could go to some Russian portals, Telegram channels, and so on, and you could
See what people are writing.
yeah, and it's a tragedy. It's very dramatic because there is a huge wave of joy. They are saying, "That's good. Proceed, please. Draw into the blood," and so on and so on. So there is not Vladimir Putin's war.
It's a people's war.
Unfortunately, it's a war of Russian people. So for my generation, there is no possibility of a dialogue with Russians anymore. But let's imagine that after 20, 30 years, we'll try to build some kind of a dialogue because the geography
Makes it inevitable.
yes, geography is unchangeable, so we will always have a border with Russia. And in the case, if Russia rethinks itself, invents some new way of describing itself into the world, some kind of a new state project, and also reclaims the war crimes the state committed, maybe it would be some kind of collective thinking about the possibility, not the dialogue itself, but about the possibility of a dialogue. And I strongly believe that Ukrainian literature especially will be the place of mourning of our killed people. We already discussed it with my colleague Oksana at the breakfast. It's a war between a modern society and medieval society.
Yeah, that has refused to move forward.
Yeah, and so it's a unspeakable pain to
Yep.
okay.
Got you.
Just a second. The best people of the country are killed in this war with the almost wild and medieval country, and it's the loss we can go through. And then all the Ukrainian project for future will be considered as a project moving west, far from Russia. As Mykola Khvilievy, one of the brilliant Ukrainian writers killed in a genocidal way in the 1930s, wrote "Get away from, far away from Moscow."
Russia, from Moscow, yeah. Thank you so much. My next question, you think about it. And it was going to be about, but once we found ourselves, because we have to go light, we can't end heavy. It's about the notorious Slavic humor. You people find jokes in the most ridiculous spaces, so you must find something funny before this ends. Where is the mic for questions from the audience? Oh, I can run around because I need the exercise. Can I run around? Don't bring the microphone. Let me run around. Oh God, my back. So I'm coming. So who's first? Comments, questions for the audience? Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a microphone whether you said yes or no. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very enlightening presentation. Oh, my name is Seto. That's a very interesting presentation. I'm really interested in the parts where there's this convergence and all of you are narrating the same kind of story. But the other aspect that I wanted to find out is how you are relating to each other by telling the same stories. Would you want to contact her to find out if the two of you can collaborate and tell the story from different perspectives. So you are telling it from maybe an African perspective, and she's telling it from a Ukrainian perspective. Is that collaboration there, or are you envisaging such a collaboration? Thank you.
So this may be the start of a beautiful friendship, is what he's saying. So is this something you would consider?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's possible because like one of the things, the war comes in different forms. It's mechanized. It's having all of those things to it. Bottom line is we have a lot of things that happen in common. War is a bloody thing. It's dirty. It's ugly, and that remains fundamental. There are stories. There's a Ukrainian somewhere who lost their entire family. There's a Liberian somewhere who had the same experience. On that level, we can connect. And I think one of the advantages we have is that we've gone ahead, so we are able to help them to see the situation. And another advantage they have is that we have social media, where you can go and do all the nasty fight, the bad fight. You don't have to be physical anymore, which we didn't have. It was me seeing you out there, and we go for it, or we don't go for it. So there are a lot of possible ways that we can help them each other, because in this case, when we do these things, we also help ourselves. You would think it's over. Our war ended 20 years ago. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was sitting with a girlfriend and her husband. We were talking something, and everybody just got quiet. Because in that space, right there, we were all having fun. We remembered a fourth person who we lost during the war. We had not spoken of in 20 plus years. It's been there. We've all suppressed it because we all stayed there. We saw it happen. We never spoke about it. We've never spoken about it. And this one time, we are there having fun. It pops up. And everybody keeps quiet. And you are like, no one knows what to say, because we all dealt with that issue. We chucked it somewhere very far. We suppressed it. Not a single day did we address that issue. But this is just 3 or so weeks ago. And we're sitting in the car. We had just come from having lunch. We're sitting in the car. They're about to go upstairs. And we all sit there. She's crying. The husband is looking at me. We said, because this was our fourth member we grew up together. This is someone that would have been here. And we're remembering that, something happened. And I think I have a reminder. And I had an old picture of her. It popped up for her birthday that was coming, Facebook reminder. She had seen it. Whilst we were talking, she was on her phone and she saw it, and that prompted the whole thing. And we were out there, what do we say? Because I have never thought about it anymore. I've dealt with that issue basically by suppressing it. It's not easy watching a friend die and holding on to you. You can't do anything, you're helpless. And I can't deal with the situation. I've never dealt with the situation. And she wants to know what the last moments were like. And she puts me in a position that is uncomfortable because I've never thought about it all these years. I've just kept it somewhere so far. She wants resolution. She thinks if I'm able to tell her what those last moments were, it gives her resolution. I'm not ready for that. So we're all stuck in that case. So in those cases where you find your people are telling you stories, as a publisher, as a writer, especially being a poet, you have to now draw a line between when do I tell this story, how do I tell this story, still keep the voice, seek justice, but not to provoke situation, because it's not every story you tell during a war.
Thank you. Catherine?
And my short reply will be that I am absolutely sure that in our common world home, there is no other pain. The old pain we suffer is our common, and we should be very open to the experience of others, because all lessons, all previous wars, apartheid, genocide, and so on, it's the part of the common human history, and this is the way we are learning to be humans. That's it.
Thank you so much. So two final. One, Ray ends it each time. So after you, then Ray. Then the panelists respond, then we end.
Well, it's a question. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Tete. I'm a photographer. First of all, I would like to say that wars are terrible. And we are capable of doing some really horrible things to ourselves. So if we could, we should abstain from anything conflict if we can. I would like to know from you if, in the process of healing after a war, photographs can play a part in that, the process of healing.
Of telling the truth and of.
Yes, because he is a photographer.
Okay.
I mean, before we would know of any war here in Africa, then we would have seen photographs. So it means people have seen the war go on. In order to, let me say, reset their minds from what they saw, could photographs do same? Not photographs of the war, but different kinds of photographs of nature, for example. Could they help people heal from a war? Sunsets.
You know, I've learned a lot about Africa from photographs, and I believe that this is a perfect way to see a world and to feel through the photographer's eyes the love, the atmosphere, the spirit of the place. And during the war, you know, here in Ukraine we have maybe the first war which is completely online and shown especially in very good but very traumatic photographs by Ukrainian photographers and award-winning, world-famous. It's not a topic of some proud because it's better not to have those photographs and the problem they are raising. But I do believe that this is the kind of language which is very rough and very straight and could be helpful for common understanding, for recovering some very problematic topics, and every photograph showing the landscape, even the wounded landscape, it's the way of speaking about the pain and resilience.
Yeah, I don't want you to limit it to photograph. What I'll tell you is during a war, healing process, art is that major medium that drives healing.
That's art.
Art in all its forms. So we write on the one hand, but on the other hand, the artists are painting stories depicting a modern Liberia and a post-conflict Liberia. And every now and then they go back to that process where you see Liberia is strewn with tears and all of those things. But for photograph, there were two collections that I'm aware of. There was this collection that was being done during the war as it was happening. So there was a group of guys on the battlefront, not Westerners, that I think Charles Taylor did that and the AFL did that. Whenever they went on the battlefront, they snapped pictures of those that were killed. They kept that catalog, and so I was in 2017 when I went back home. I'm presented with a folder of over 1,000 pictures of
dead
corpses.
bodies.
Yeah, corpse. Why were they keeping that? Different reasons. They told me they were assigned to go there and they needed proof of death for some of these people. But then they didn't know what to do with the pictures. They just had the pictures, and what could we do with the pictures? So we had suggested that, okay, we can crop the pictures and get the faces so that people can know. There are many people who don't know what happened to their dads, their sons. They have no idea. So if they can identify these people, their stories, they can find a healing process. This is a deep project. I didn't think we were capable of handling the project. I mean, it just was too heavy. So where the project is right now is stalled. But then, on the other hand, Jack, one of our authors, he's a poet, an American poet, stayed in Liberia from the 60s up to the 70s as a Peace Corps officer, took a lot of pictures during his time there. And it turned out that through interacting on my page, one of the boys he taught, the boy's father, rather, he showed me some of the pictures, so I would normally post them randomly. He said, but that's my dad. He reaches out to me. You posted a photo the other day with my dad in the photo. Where did you get it from? So I'm like,
a picture of his father?
yeah, his father was a student of Jack in the 60s.
And his father was missing.
So they had no picture of the dad being alive. The only picture they had of the dad was that photo. So I reached out to Jack, and Jack said, okay, but then I'm going to send you all of the pictures that I have, 1,000+ photos. He took some in Ghana. He was assigned several places. So we're in the process of taking those photos and putting them out there. These are normal times photos, not during the war, before the war.
Okay.
So this family now has a picture of the dad or the granddad because Jack took those pictures before. And then there was another incident where the surrounding town had a wall in the 60s. They had just come in what you call colonial left, that portion, and they come to the central government area. So there's a picture of the town that does not exist anywhere else with that mud wall, and Jack has that. So when we posted that picture, people in that town were saying this wasn't the town. Only the elders of the town, who were kids at the time, could identify that this is actually the town. So those two incidents made us to realize there's a lot we can do with the photographs over there if we just curated them. So we are hoping that we get funding and have a whole show display next year where people can come look at the pictures and identify their own people, different parts of the city. But that's it's still young. We're still in the formative stages of the project where we're talking to people to fund that, where we can have an open house.
Thank you so much.
Art is the driver.
Yes, art is. So final comments, which will it demand responses from us because somebody's giving me daggers for eyes?
Yeah.
Because she owes us a Slavic joke because we hear that their humor is quite macabre. So she owes us one, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
One.
I'm Rendebi, literary translator. I'm a literary translator from Cameroon, and as a translator, I'm always interested in how the truth is conveyed, and I heard you talking about the truth, and I would like to ask you, because at times we can see that today's praise are pastor hunters. So when you are writing the truth, how are you writing that truth? Is that truth considering history? That may have been today's killed were yesterday's killers, like that family who was killed at the beach when they were playing football with coconut. So maybe the parents of that family killed, maybe the parents did that before. We don't know. But do you consider history when you're writing about the truth in times of conflict?
And he also works as a translator. So also, how do you transmit truth across languages also?
It's a very important question. Thank you, because I'm constantly asked by European intellectuals in my foreign discussions and conversations. Where was my father during the Soviet invasion in Czechoslovakia, for example, or so on?
Yeah. Hungary, 1950 something.
For example, 68. My father refused to be the part of Soviet troops, which intruded Czechoslovakia and Prague, for example. So there are answers from the past, and we always should keep in mind this history, this story of Soviet occupation and of what our parents, grandparents, ancestors did. We have a big discussion in the community, in the society, about the Holocaust, about the Shoah in Ukraine, about all that stuff we survived together in Second World War, and so on and so on. Great Ukrainian story, and telling Ukrainian story, the part of which is the last Russian-Ukrainian war, is impossible without rethinking this long tradition of resistance and of everything what it brings. So all the project of Ukrainian literature is somehow is a way of rethinking the past and inventing the way of talk into the world out loud.
Thank you so much. I think we are... Okay, no, I was teasing her about that. Yeah, she will tell it to me later. I was joking about that. So thank you so much for joining us on this panel on writing in times of conflict. And I hope that with it, we have a greater idea of what our desire as writers. We have an idea of what the trauma is like for the singular and lonely act of bearing witness, and also the chance that these stories can lead to justice and eventually reconciliation, which is what should end all conflicts. Thank you to Catherine. Thank you to Othniel. Thank you for allowing
Thank you.
me.
It was very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.